A very warm welcome to the Philips HR Talks. As you know, this is a platform that we have created which is an open platform for sharing knowledge. And the talks are live recorded on a video and then we post it on the YouTube. You saw the first one, which was with Anand Pillai, where he came and talked about personal branding, which he is very, very passionate about. Then the last one that we put up, which had happened here again, was about, how to enhance diversity while you are acquiring talent. That is, when you are recruiting, how do you do that? Because that's the fountainhead, okay, so as to say, of wanting to, or your ability to get diversity in your organization. How to do that? And that panel discussion was very well facilitated by Arman last time, which was put up, and this is the third in the series. Now, in this one, we have a very exciting and a very unique platform that we have tried to create, where we are going to learn from some of the young role models, okay, so as to say. So, and a young role model is not an oxymoron anywhere, okay, because anyone can be a role model. So that itself turns the wisdom on its head, that there's tremendous amount of wisdom even with young talent, with young people. And how can we learn from them? So with that, and without much ado, I would request Esther. Esther is a very, very close friend, a wonderful person, and a terrifically committed professional. She is the editor-in-chief and the founder of People Matters, which is a media house actually, which is dedicated to the cause of developing the HR community and the business community in the area of HR. That is Esther for you. So Esther, yeah, please.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Yash. Thanks, Gautam and Zenobia and the whole Philips HR Talks team for having us today. I think it's a privilege to be here. So basically, the objective of today was to invite some of our winners. I think there is tremendous learning from them. There are people who feel that they are impacting business in their own capacity. There are people who understand that HR is indispensable for their company's success. Those are those young role models, as Yash was talking about.
So let me give you a brief introduction of our three winners who are here with us this evening. So Girish Kohli, he is a consultant in Mercer. He's been in Mercer for almost 6 years. He's a postgraduate from Narsi Monji. He was actually a technology person with a very strong business flavor who chose HR, which is something that I find very inspiring, because that means, in our profession, there is clearly something that attracts people across the board. Rahul Kandhal works in Glaxo SmithKline. Again, he's been in GSK for many years. He's a postgraduate from MDI. And he heads the North HR for the organization. And Saurabh is head of talent in MakeMyTrip. I've had the privilege to hear him in other occasions as well, and he's somebody who has tremendous sense of humor, and I think that's one thing that defines him, and I love to see how you use that in your work as well. So we look forward hearing from the three of you. Yash, if you want to join us on stage, let's give a big round of applause to Yash, Girish, Rahul, and Saurabh. Over to you guys.
A very, very warm welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And I was just sitting there when you were being introduced and your companies were being introduced. You see, Mercer is one of our consulting companies that we work with. And if you look at MakeMyTrip or GSK Home Healthcare, I mean, we, our family members, our kids, we use all their products, yeah? So it is fantastic to have you from companies where we can also relate to. So this is terrific. And to begin with, I want to thank you very much for agreeing to be on this platform of Philips HR Talks. There's so much of learning, that happens to me, Esther, personally, when I learn, sit, discuss, and talk to people of similar profile in my HR organization. But what is unique about today is all those people and me are going to learn from them, and we are going to get some tremendous outside-in perspective, okay? So thanks for being here. My first question, to all of you and give your reflections is, would you like to tell us a bit about your career journey so far, in brief, from your MBA school that you started off from, or the school that you graduated from, and the company that you began with, and where you are today. Because then that will give people a bit of a good understanding and will set a nice context for the next questions. So any which way you want to go.
Okay, so I can start. So I'm a mechanical engineer from PEC Chandigarh. Worked for 2 years as a design engineer after that, and then accidentally landed in MDI. HR didn't happen by choice, and I wrote CAT thrice, and I think finally I decided let's just go ahead. But the interesting thing is, ever since I am in HR, I didn't regret even a single day that where am I? And I think this is one question that bothers a lot of people in the first year. And I think luckily, or it resonated a lot with my own interests. And as far as my experience goes, I did in my summer internship with GSK, finally ended up with them, again a matter of fortune, in 2009, which was not such a great year. And I've been with them for the last 4.25 years now. Did 3 roles as a HR generalist for a factory, one of their oldest factories in Punjab, and then regional HR for sales. And for the last 1 year, apart from handling HR, I also look after one of the business responsibilities, which is handling sales strategy for Region North, which is an additional thing that I wanted, and organization just supported it. So in brief, that's what about my experience.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Hi, Saurabh. I did my bachelor's in finance, and then did my master's in HR from Pune University, and was difficult to find a job at that point in time because I was not from a Premier B school, so a little bit of challenge if you're not from a Premier B school. So I thought, let me just start with PhD and do some bit of research. I cleared my NET and JRF fortunately in one go, and I was about to start my PhD, and then somebody from JK Group called me, Dr. Bide, who is my mentor. So he said, why don't you come for an interview? I went and I met him, and I think fortunate enough, he said, you'll work with me. After 2.5 hours of interview, he said me, okay, I will give you X salary. I said, Dr. Bide, it's a very small salary. He said, don't worry, I will invest in you, and after 6 years, you will earn 15 times of what I am giving you. I said, okay. So great role. I was part of the organization development team, part of the corporate HR. Stayed there for 2 years. Got promoted, and then moved to Aviva. Aviva is a global. I got a global role with Aviva. I was part of their global organization development team. 2.5 years. Yes, learned a lot. I got two learnings, quick learnings from there. One was how does the service sector really work, and second was more on the global side. I got some bit of global exposure there. Then I got called from MakeMyTrip through a reference. I met Deep and my ex-head of HR, Rohit, and they convinced me that I have some capability and I can head and do and take care of much bigger role. So I joined MakeMyTrip as head of organization development, worked on employer branding strategy thrice in a row in Great Place to Work, worked on talent management, employee engagement model at MakeMyTrip. Then I moved to talent acquisition within HR at MakeMyTrip, and that's what my career journey has been. My longest tenure with MakeMyTrip, it's been now 4 years.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you.
My HR journey starts pre-MBA actually. I was working with a IT company, small startup called Indigo Architects. We were a bunch of 50 people, and I was telling Esther also this story. The problem that we used to face was every time we tried to grow, we would go from 40, 45, 50, 55 and then back to 45 people. And we could never go beyond that magical figure, never hit the 75 or 100 people mark. We were always a small company. And the challenges that we faced in HR were, the seeds were put in them. And after 2 years of working with that company, I decided I wanted to do something other than just IT. Did my MBA, and in the second year when we had to select electives, my first choice was marketing. That's what I naturally do. For the second one, I could either take up finance, but I was like, whatever finance I've learned in first year is good enough. Unless I'm majoring in finance, second year elective as a minor in finance doesn't make sense for me. So the only other interest I had was HR. So I took that up, and during the placement time, Mercer came, and my journey from in HR began from there. Like, So I wanted to be close to business, and this was as close to business as I thought I could get at that point of time. But having joined Mercer, doing the projects I've done, any project that we actually start off with, we have realized that the first thing we start talking about is what is your value chain. Please explain us your value chain. We don't talk HR with them anyways. So we don't have our first meeting with the business meeting with the HR guy. We have it with the CEO or the head finance, head marketing or head sales. Somebody who can explain us the business. And all HR that we talk about, we do, there's two parts to it. It's about the people and it's about the business. And the business is personal to the people. And through all our projects, organization structure design, competency frameworks, rewards design, all through these 5.5 years, I've really cherished that I didn't get into business consulting, I got into HR consulting because I get flavors of two sides of the coin which drive any business, the people and the value that you add to them.
Excellent. Thank you, Girish. Thank you so much. One common thing that you must have noticed was they displayed ability of making a right and a good decision when they preferred and chose HR before finance and marketing. Yeah. So that just shows that how capable and able these people are. But I'm kidding. Keep the lighter thing aside. But it's amazing. That you have to make that decision. You make that decision, you get successful, and then you feel good about it. Yeah. The very fact that you mentioned about it, that means you wanted to highlight it as a part of your start of your experience, right? There's one point that I would like to add and would make is, when you said that I'm not from a premier institute. Well, I think that's what I liked about Are You on the List process, because I have fundamentally believed coming out of a premier institute or going into a premier institute can definitely give you an advantage or an edge, but you are as good as you are, okay? And you will be as good as you develop yourself to be. It has very little to do with the institutes that we come from and the institutes that we graduate from. And the reason I liked your highlighting that, and I'm highlighting, is once you are working in the industry, it should not really matter whether you came from a class or a B class or a C class institution. I don't agree with that categorization itself, okay? In fact, what becomes the differentiating factor is your capabilities, your skills, your attitude, and so many other things, which go on to making you successful in a career. And congratulations for doing that, to three of you, okay? Which leads me to the next question, And again, it's a common question, would love to hear your response one by one. What do you think are the key critical capabilities required for an HR professional today to be successful, and why?
All right, so I think one of the things, and I can definitely share my experience and what has worked for some of my other folks. Number one is that you need to be a great learner and curious observer. Because even Dave Ulrich mentions in his model that you have to start with business context and things like that. But I think that's too much to ask for unless you are not really a curious observer and you just don't have too many questions in your mind. So the first thing that comes to my mind is that you should be asking too many questions all the time. Why this is happening, or what is happening, and so on and so forth. And as you will grow, you will start asking the right questions. So fundamentally, asking questions will ultimately lead you to asking the right questions. So that's number one for me. Number two is building relationships, which sounds very intangible, but I think it takes a lot of effort, how you build relationships. Because whatever we do in HR, I think we actually lead very few initiatives on our own, and most of the things we have to actually get done from other people. Whether it is engagement, whether it is right talent management and things like that. And we can do our own bit in building capability, but ultimately you have to get it done from others. So relationships really help you in getting the buy-in. It also helps in you influencing people so that at least people listen to you, that what you are saying really adds value to them. And then finally, your job will be much easier throughout the year. I mean, you can just then keep following up with them, what's happening, and you can play the role of really supporting them. But unless you have very strong relationships, it's very, very difficult to drive HR agenda in the business. And the third one, which again is very important, is your ability to communicate and activate a lot of stuff in this age of abundance and information just being available all over the place, suddenly people have very short span of attention, right? So if you are saying something, and I mean, that includes even this session. So you have cell phones, you have Twitter, you have Facebook, and so many other things going on, right? Something or the other always distracting you. So unless you are somebody who can knit such a story well in the organization that it really is impactful and powerful enough for people to connect and really listen to, it's again very difficult to bring everybody together, because that's what we keep talking about. HR has to really bring people together. So the ability to build a very good story around organization, purpose, people has all to do with very strong communication ability and activation around it. So I think that's what I find is very, very critical to be successful in this particular role.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rahul. Saurabh?
I think the first and foremost is your analytical ability and how do you make sense out of the big data. So there is so much data available. You have tweets, you have social feeds now. One example which comes to my mind, very recent one, I think Google shared a story very recently where they said, I think the way we have been doing interviews in last few years, I think it's not really working. There is no correlation between asking brain teasers, which is the McKinsey way of interviewing, and on the job performance. So I think one, the organization really needs to have courage, and the HR guys also need to really have courage to say that whatever I was doing, I think there is still scope and there was no correlation. So I think one is the analytical ability, and you need to exhibit to the business also that you can make sense out of the data and you understand business. So one is that. Second, I think humor is very, very important for a HR guy. If you see the bell curve in any organization, right, you will only have 10% of the people who will really talk high about HR scientifically, right? So scientifically, it will only be 10% of the people who will say, oh my God, I think I have got the right increment. The others, you need to really explain them and also have smile on your face, and sometimes use humor also when it comes to explaining things. If you talk about things in HR are sometimes very, very ambiguous. It's not black and white, right? That's why you involve more and more stakeholders when it comes to any HR decision, right? In a business decision, a CEO and a CMO can take a call, whereas in a performance management, that's why you involve all stakeholders so that those ambiguity can be removed and that personal bias can be removed. So in nutshell, one needs to be very, very smart when it comes to communication and playing with humor. So the third one, I think the relationship management is of course very, very important. I think something around for people who start their career in HR, comfort around top management is also something very, very important. I think I learned after 5 years of my career, difficult to learn, right? You have a senior person standing in front of you, you have something in your mind, can you really tell him what's in your mind? Can you really put across your point? I think that takes a little bit of time. I think people who start their career, I think should have that confidence and build that ability of working around, I think working with senior people. I think comfort with senior people. So that's how.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Saurabh. Thank you. Girish?
In addition to what Rahul and Saurabh have talked about, I think there's one other point that people, especially HR people, right from the beginning need to start focusing upon, which is behavioral economics. We haven't, HR has been pretty fuzzy till now. A lot of things we do, why do we have the bell curve? Is it useful? How do we give salary increments? What's the basis for it? How do we retain people? How do we engage people? All these questions have two parts to it. It is partly related to the people's psychology, and it's partly related to the economics which goes beyond that psychology. So we need to start understanding that, and we got to use both what he talked about in terms of relationships and what he talked about in terms of analytics to bring it together. So let me throw a question to you. You've got a top performer who's about to leave. If you give him extra money, extra increment, will it keep him there, or will it make him more valuable in the market and make everyone else think in the market that this guy is really something shiny and this we should hire at even extra cost? You can't be sure which way it will work out. And that is why increasingly you'll find that HR will need to start going down to numbers. It will start having to understand the economics behind decisions, and will start talking more like sales and marketing and engineering, and not just in the broad frameworks we've created. those frameworks will have to be linked to results and numbers.
Oh, these are fantastic perspectives, you know, I mean, so fresh, some of them, well, you can say also rest on traditional wisdom, but, you know, two distinct ones and then the behavioral economic ones. I think this is terrific. Moving on to the next question, and this is again not a question, and I'll just present an opinion and would like to have your thoughts on that. So we are talking a lot about the generational diversity, okay, and the complexity around it, because we know that, you know, the millennials are going to be almost more than 50% of the organization in the next 2 years, and after next 5 years they will be around 65%, okay, of the organization, the X and the millennials, okay. Now, I would be very keen and interested to understand, have you faced a struggle in terms of dealing with people who are either Gen Y or baby boomers, okay, or you did not face a struggle, or you think they are facing a struggle to deal with the millennials or XY? Very keen and interested to have your perspective and your opinion on that, because this is a real complex issue, you know, that at least some of us think so, is affecting and will affect the construct of your workforce. So I'll stop there, and I know he'll kill me after. I'm not going to start with him every now and so I'll start with.
To take a shot at this,
yes.
Because while you were talking about diversity in terms of age groups and linking the millennials and the baby boomers and the contradictions we face, actually, you know, and this is from my workplace, the age diversity, when we say the generation gap, it's actually not 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it's every 5 years. So we have fresh graduates coming in, and boy, is it hard to understand them. Is it hard to understand them? The concept of time, the concept of the amount of time they spend on social networks, the amount of information they have, the amount of confidence they have, the kind of diverse things they are into. It is amazing that, you know, when we talk to them, we feel slightly disconnected. And we have a challenge to explain to them what is work, what are the valuable things, and we have to learn some things from them. There's so many things that they can teach us. Our minds are slower than theirs. That relativity also goes back the other way. So when I'm talking to someone senior to me, he has the same thing. People are used to the concept of slow growth. We are used to the concept of expansive, rapid, explosive growth. We are the generation which is seeing 100 crore movies being made every second day. There's a release and every second movie is hitting 100 crores. We're seeing growth like crazy. The people who are going to come after us, what is the kind of growth that they'll see? Will they even want to stay in India? So all of the people I have are wanting to go abroad and do their GMAT. These are the kind of challenges, retention challenges that you would never have thought of earlier. So yes, connecting with people both up and down is difficult, and the only way I have found is to put yourself in their shoes. Think about what is their fears and what are their aspirations, and you will be able to connect to the people above you, below you, side of you. So it's not just connecting to the age gap up and below. I and my peers are separate. The kind of aspirations I have, the kind of views I have on what should be business, what should life, how should work-life balance be, is totally different from someone else. And the only way that we can all work together, a 360 connect, is that when we start understanding each other's fears and aspirations. And another thing that we found useful at our workplace is if you use Strength Finder, that's a Gallup tool or something, it identifies that out of 20 competencies, you've got only about 5 competencies that which you are the most strong at. And you realize that to be effective, you can't just have those 5 competencies and be effective. You need all those 20 competencies, which means you need to at least have 4 other people who can readily connect with to make something happen. And those 4 other people will probably be above you, side of you, and below you. So the only way you can connect, and I've been lucky with that, is that if you try and put yourself in their shoes, understand what drives them, you'll be able to connect with them much better. So I took longer.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Girish. Saurabh, do you want to?
Our organization relatively is very young, so average age of employees is 26, 27. But the challenge is how do you really manage Gen Y? So one is they're very aspirational. How do you manage people's aspiration? Every year they want to do something new, they want promotion, they want horizontal or lateral growth. So one is that on the growth front, how do you really manage that? One is fortunately our business model is such that there is so much to do that we have new acquisitions happening and other things happening. So they get a lot of opportunity. Also their style of learning is very, very experiential. Now how do you align experiential learning? So I think gone are the days where people want to sit in a classroom for 4 days and say, okay, let me teach you about say Europe as a destination, let me share some statistics with you. So they say, okay, can you arrange a trip for me to Europe so that I can go and experience and come back and share my learning? So that's more of experiential. And yes, so as MakeMyTrip, we have fam trips or study tours, how you say. So these guys go to Europe or any part of the world, and then they do first-hand selling to the customer, and they're also more satisfied. For people on the online side, they get projects which are very, very impactful, and they have more learning through these experiential projects. Then I think communication plays a very, very important role. So there were times, so even I have faced where Facebook and Twitter are blocked in offices. So can you really do with that with Gen Y? Now you have smartphones in your pocket and they can do it anytime. So I think rather than restricting them, it's better to tell them that you're working in an office and these are the limits. So we came up with a social media policy which clearly says do's and don'ts in office. And any person can open Facebook or Twitter and see how he or she can communicate with their peers through that mode. And people also express what they have in their mind, especially on Twitter. And from HR point of view, you come to know a lot about how people are thinking in the organization. Rather, it's a tool for us also in the HR, where the HR team monitors it and and do a dipstick on the pulse as to how people are feeling in the organization. I think 3 important things which have really helped us in managing Gen Y. One is the communication bit, very, very authentic communication. Rather than doing surveys, so we don't do employee satisfaction surveys in the organization. So we have a 1:50, which is HR is to employee ratio. It's better to stand in middle and say, okay, you tell me how you feel working with MakeMyTrip. So rather than giving them an anonymous platform, gone are the days where people used to think giving feedback anonymous way is a better way than giving it directly. People are so vocal about things, they put, I've seen people even putting their resignations on Facebook. This place really sucks, my manager does this and blah, blah, blah. I think I need to move out. And you can really see what people are really thinking. So gone are the days where things were anonymous. Now with Gen Y, things are so open that sometimes even you are shocked, right? So I think from communication point of view, from growth point of view, how do you manage the experiential learning and how do you give them opportunity and how do you manage their career aspiration? Third is compensation, very, very important. These guys know how much do I contribute in the business and am I getting my share back or not. So I think 70% of the organization at MakeMyTrip has stock options. So 70% of them are owners. Based on their performance rating, they get fresh stock grant every year. And then it becomes a snowball and then the sense of ownership goes high. Even a junior most guy, an executive would have stocks. So that's more on the compensation. And how do you be more transparent when it comes to compensation? Every organization is facing challenge in terms of macroeconomic indicators, and we are also facing. I think it's better to stand up and tell people, this is how your company has performed, this is how things are, and this is what your share is. You are getting impacted more as you go higher in the organization. Your line of sight is more when you're at the top. At the bottom, your line of sight is not that great. So we're being very honest. We do open houses in front of 100, 150 people in batches and tell them how the organization has performed, what is their performance rating, and what's their increment. Increments are in public. Variable amounts are in public. People know anybody who is a 3 rater on a scale of 5 will get X. Anybody who is a 4 rater on a scale of 5 will get Y. So that's the transparency and the communication bit. So I think in nutshell, communication, ownership, career growth opportunities, these are the points how we really manage Gen Y in our organization. That's how we have been doing.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Rahul.
Okay, so I work in a very different context. Okay, so GSKCH is FMCG. So sometimes I have my evening drink with somebody who's 56 years old, and sometimes with somebody who's 27. So I think I face very different type of context than what both Girish and Saurabh have explained here. But I think to my mind, when I think about diversity, I think a little bit differently. I think what makes people click, that is the most important thing. What makes people click in a club, what makes people click at home, is something which is much larger than just being diverse. So as long as there is something big which can connect two people well, I don't think diversity really plays that big an issue. These days, everybody has, like kids, and so everybody's on Twitter, they're on Facebook, and so on and so forth, right? So when people are at home, they are comfortable with all of this. But when they come to work, they have issues. So I think that's, in my mind, a very dual standard on the same issue. So if diversity works at home, if diversity works in a club to make people connect, it has to work in an organization setup as well. So when we recruit people, I think we are very particular that why this person really wants to join. And none of the rational indexes have to be the reason for his selection, which could be compensation, which could be location and things like that. So while we consider all those factors, but I think for us it is very important what is going to emotionally engage him more. What is going to excite my boss to have that evening drink with him? Are they able to connect with each other or not? Because if that thing is in place, I think a lot of things just go away and you become more flexible because of the sheer fact that you end up liking the person and end up getting this feeling that you are in this together. So I think initially also Esther mentioned we lay a lot of impetus on purpose and whether the person has a very short-sightedness or is he really thinking a little bit longer in terms of vision. Why is he in sales? Why not anywhere else? Why has he come to join GSK, or for that matter, why has he even come for the interview? Has he taken any feedback from the market, and so on and so forth. So I think the bigger thing is, are you clear on the purpose that can connect people well? And definitely second thing is flexibility, which I believe organizations anyways are imbibing very rapidly these days because things are changing every 6 months. So diversity is not about just Gen X, Gen Y. I think things change every 6 months. So as long as you are not agile as an organization to keep innovating stuff, it's very difficult to keep up to the expectations of even senior leadership, or even people who have just entered the workforce. So I think purpose and flexibility and your zeal to address this in the bigger context is what really plays a huge role in making the whole thing work.
Excellent. No, thank you so much. These are fantastic perspectives, okay? Because, as I was listening and I was thinking, so I'll share an experience. So there was this very senior in experience and in age gentleman whom I have known and I have tremendous respect for, and I have seen that this gentleman manages a team of very young professionals, okay? So I put forward a question to this person and said that, sir, I just want to understand from you that is there a disconnect you have because of the seniority of your experience and age with the younger people that you manage? And this person thought about it and he said that, Yash, I don't think so there's a disconnect, but at times there's a problem. And the problem is that I understand the young people very well, but they just can't understand me. And I listened to that carefully and I said, So I said, but that was my question, sir. You have just rephrased the answer as that same question. That problem is the disconnect. So one learning for me was that we are not even ready to recognize the disconnect at times, okay? But my experience has been, and I manage a team which is full of young people, okay? Not that I'm old, okay? But the way I learn from them is, or the way I seek to understand them is, when you make a commitment to learn from the younger person at what they are good at, okay? So just to give you an example, in Philips, for example, so I've been a student of social media for the past 1.5 years, and now I have taken Gautam Ghosh for the past 4 months as my mentor. So he's reverse mentoring me. Now if I would have kept a mindset that what will Gautam teach me, he's younger to me, but the moment I make a commitment to learn from a younger person who's teaching me something, you tend to start respecting the person. And when you start respecting, you start understanding the person, you start relating, and then you get to know how they think, what they feel. Similarly, you know, I mean, there are so many other young people like Abhinav and Sonia. They teach me where to go and dine and drink and, you know, in Gurgaon. It could be varied. It could be from learning at a social level to learning at a professional level. Okay, I learn so much from them even at professional level. But it's the moment you make a commitment to learn, you just tend to respect and understand them. And I think we should also start learning both ways. Huh? Yeah. So, because there's that expectation that you can only learn from seniors, and seniors feel that I can learn nothing from my junior. And when you say senior, junior by age, I think that can be transformational.
Right.
Yeah. But outstanding perspectives. Thank you very much for that. And my wrap-up question, keeping the time in mind, which is a concluding question, is, in brief, what would be your advice? Because, you know, this video is going to reach thousands of people. Okay, that's been our experience. So it reaches thousands, you know, and which is only growing. And a lot of people accessing the videos on our YouTube channel are students from MBA schools. And we are glad about it because they were one of our target audience. What would be your advice, okay, to these young professionals who are preparing for graduation or who are about to graduate and who will walk into the industry? What is your advice to them, or what are your words of wisdom to them?
I'll take a shot on this one. So one is, I think a lot of people say that I am not by design in HR, I am by default. There was one profession I thought it would be easy to work in HR. Finance mein numbers hote hain, marketing mein you have sales targets and all that, so HR is the best place. I think I have realized over the period of time it's a very, very challenging function, so you should be really serious about it. And second is, ask for job rotation every 2 years. So I was myself a OD professional for 6-7 years. My talent acquisition colleague, my peer once told me, Saurabh, you haven't seen the other side, I think you should try that. And then you see the most attrition happens in talent acquisition sometimes. So I said, let me take this challenge. Then I went to my boss and I said, I need a job rotation, let me see the other side. So you should always be ready for new challenges and also think in a very, very innovative way. Innovation, sometimes you feel that only R&D people, marketing people should only focus on innovation. Innovation is, I think, core part of any HR professional. Sometimes you really run out of ideas and sometimes you don't know, and one question you keep on asking to yourself, what do you do when you don't know what to do? There is a skill, you need to hire for that skill and you really don't know how to hire. How do you answer this question to yourself? It becomes really challenging, and then you come up with the innovative ideas. Social media people have been talking about that, let's use social media. We thought, let's use online marketing tools to tap talent all across the globe. Use SEO technologies, use SEM technologies, or use display. We used that and we really got good results from that. We hired almost 600 women, housewives who work from home for us. We used very, very innovative ways of tapping that talent. I think in nutshell, if I was to pick 3 things, one is innovation, second is just get ready for the new challenges, and third is, I think you should be very, very serious about HR as a function. It really makes business sense.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Saurabh. Rahul?
Okay, so just to add on to what Saurabh has said, I think landing in this function accidentally and being here after 4 years, I can say I have huge regard for this function. So this is more for people who want to join HR function, because it can just add value to the business, and you can actually search a lot of stuff for that on internet, how HR is evolving, and it has been evolving for years and it will keep evolving, right? But bottom line is, because it can impact lives, and before it impacts lives of others, it starts impacting your own life. And whatever we do in HR, ultimately it has to impact lives of people, and not that people who are in marketing, whatever they do, it doesn't impact. But I think The key differentiator here is when we talk about things like leadership, employee engagement, and so many other things. A lot of it is about changing others. And we have to do this when we have so little self-awareness about our own selves. That how do I introduce a very single change in ourselves, right? So in this function, you are continuously challenged about this process of change. And I think ultimately, sooner or later, you realize that first of all, let me understand myself. So how change works for me. And the day you start, this question hits you, it's an altogether different journey, from here onwards. And so that's what I tell people, and that they have to spend a lot of time on self-awareness, on things like emotional intelligence, on things like mindfulness, about which we do not have very strong curricula in a lot of business schools. So we spend a lot of time on recruitment, performance management, but the bigger question is, how is this thing going to work when you're sitting with somebody who is completely closed, who is not even ready to listen to you? So how do you crack that equation? And for that, it's very, very important that you first do a lot of self-awareness. So what works with somebody, but that same thing might not work with somebody else. So that's my only thing. So choose this profession with pride, dignity, and then work a lot on self-awareness, because that's what is going to contribute to others. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you so much. Yeah. Girish?
I have 3 things to share. One is, when I was in the first year of MBA, and literally the first week, we had a group of alumni coming and talking to us, and they said, when they threw open the house for questions, so a lot of hands went up out of the group which talked about placements. Now, first week of MBA, if you're thinking about placements and jobs, then you've totally missed out the point of doing an MBA. The point of doing an MBA is actually only 2: having fun and making friends. Because everything else, the books, the teachers, you'll anyways have to do. The job will only come to you after the end of 2 years. It can't come to you at the beginning of the first year. It can only come then. But the fun and friends are with you for the 2 years. And that is actually things that, when you start doing that, you find out that at the end of the 2 years, people who had the most fun and have the most friends are the people who got the best placements. So that is one part. Don't focus on your, focus on your career, but don't focus on the money or the short-sightedness part. Do what interests you. Have fun. Money will come eventually if you're good at it. If you're not good at it, money will not come no matter what you do. The second thing is travel. I've realized that my life's most interesting experiences, learnings have been from traveling. I just came back from Europe today morning, and just want to tell you a small story. So, as it so happened, me and my wife were just walking down from Alpignan to Grimmelwald in Interlaken area. After 2 hours of sweltering in the heat, literally Alps, the heat, we came down to the station, and there was this old gentleman having coffee, and he said, "Oh, you guys are Indians, what are your names? Come have a coffee with me, let's talk." So we also, we're tired, we have a train which will take half an hour. We sat down, spoke to him, just had a general chit chat. Then he started talking about, asking us, where are we from, what do we do, and he talked about himself. He was Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. I could run around, try all my contacts, and never get Rakesh Jhunjhunwala's card in my wallet, except for walking down Alpignan to Grimmelwald. So if you've got to meet Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, if you've got to meet Indian Yash, you've got to get out of your house and get into areas where you can actually bump into people. So travel, bump into people, it will make a world of difference to you. And the third thing is, you got to stay fit. You've got to get into sports, any kinds of sports. It will teach you so much about yourself. The corporate world we are in is literally a slave driver. We are in an economy which is growing at a fast pace. We've got challenges which are overwhelming. Without enough stamina, you will simply perish. By the time you hit a 40 or a 50, you will be dead. In Europe, you see people who are 60 or 70 years, couples, they are hiking up Alps. We were in the train, they were hiking up the Alps. That is the kind of stamina that lets you enjoy life. So those were my 3 things.
Excellent. Now, this has been brilliant, like many here, I have learned so much, okay? I really want to thank you, Rahul, Saurabh, Girish, and I also want to thank Esther and People Matters for this tremendous collaboration and for bringing about this learning, okay? thank you so much. And of course, I hope everyone has enjoyed this edition of the Philips HR Talks and we have learned something from this. But thanks a lot and give them a big hand. Yeah?